Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations.
I think it's a safe bet to say that most Catholics who are actually sensible about things are really tired of the bishops in the United States, any of the bishops in the United States, endorsing heresy or heretical organizations. This is most commonly seen with James Martin doing his tour of heresy around the United States, giving talks and lectures and helping organize events that lead souls astray on that one question and that one topic that James Martin is so obsessed with. But here we have a different story today, though it's very much related. The Association of U.S. Catholic Priests is an organization of priests who very openly flaunt the teachings of the Church on a whole host of matters, and they're holding an assembly right now, a conference right now, and the bishop of the diocese that they're having this conference in is officially suggesting his priests go to the conference. He can't really order them to go, but he is suggesting that they go. That is an endorsement of the many, many heresies that they promote. This is not getting enough scrutiny from anybody, unfortunately. In fact, I didn't even see it until it was too late for me to have a video for it on the first day of the conference, but today is its second day. So we can hope that people can let the diocese know that they really do not approve if you live in that diocese. If you don't live in that diocese, calling them and making your voice heard won't have the same impact, frankly, as if you lived in that diocese, because calling your bishop is something that has a lot of power, can have a lot of power to it, but calling another person's bishop doesn't have the same effect. But our story comes to us today from the Lepanto Institute, who does great reporting on all these kinds of stories very frequently and deserves a lot of credit and praise for this stuff. So the headline is, Catholic Archdiocese encourages clergy to attend meeting of pro-James Martin women's ordination priests. People wonder why this story never goes away. Can we have deaconesses story? This, which even Francis said if they're ordained, no. That's his caveat, if they're ordained. But this story doesn't go away. It should go away. The Church has ruled definitively on this. The Old Order deaconesses were phased out by the Church because they weren't ordained anyway. But it won't go away because this is the values of the world being forced onto the Church by men who, frankly, should know better. These are trained priests who went to seminary and all the rest of it. Now, I would bet you good money that the typical priest there, if you took just a survey of the priests who are members of that organization and asked them where they went to seminary, you'd find out that most of them went to some of the most corrupted seminaries. I would bet good money on that one. And now they have their own organization, and they've got the approval of at least one bishop. So, from the article, quote, the Archdiocese of St. Louis is formally promoting and encouraging its own priests to attend the upcoming annual assembly of the Association of U.S. Catholic Priests. Identified as a date to remember on its announcements for priests webpage, the Archdiocese of St. Louis posted an image of the AUSCP's assembly flyer with the message, AUSCP 14th Annual Assembly in Lexington, Kentucky, June 24th to 27th, 2024. Details on how to register. As the Lepanto Institute has been reporting since 2017, the AUSCP is notorious for promoting women's sacramental ordination, promoting James Martin activism, promoting heretical ideas concerning the Eucharist, promoting heretical ideas about the priesthood, helping found and lead an international heretical group attempting to transform the Church. Given the organization's involvement with and promotion of ideologies long condemned by the Church, it is difficult to imagine why the Archdiocese of St. Louis would encourage its priests to attend. And while the AUSCP's history of dissidence should stand as enough of a deterrent, the recent list of assembly speakers provides ample reason to not promote this gathering to priests. Headlining the event are Bishop John Stowe and Father Thomas Rees. Bishop John Stowe is slated to lead the AUSCP's assembly retreat, which is fitting as he often speaks and prays at James Martin organizational meetings and conferences. Bishop Stowe was most recently in the news for opening his diocese for a confused hermit. His diocese issued a statement on May 21st that Bishop John Stowe accepted his profession and is grateful to Brother Christian for his witness of discipleship, integrity, and contemplative prayer for the Church. As an aside, they're only quoting what Bishop Stowe has said, hence why they're using all the language the secular world demands of us, because they're quoting verbatim what the bishop said. Continuing. Bishop Stowe also is the Episcopal advisor to the James Martin activist group Fortunate Families, who support the James Martin's parody of holy matrimony and its foundational statement attempts to excuse such activity with an appeal to conscience. In 2021, they gave a blessing during the Evil Month celebrated in June during Dignity USA hosted event protesting the congregation with the Doctrine of Faith's assertion that God cannot bless sin. And it can end, quote, and it continues like that. I think you get the idea. None of this is that surprising, that we have a modernist bishop promoting evil in the church, endorsing all the evils of the secular world at this time in history. This shouldn't surprise anybody. This is a very widespread problem. But I want to zero in on just one part of their statement here, and that is on the whole host of list of topics that this organization supports. You saw the list of their heretical ideas, but let's zero in on the organization's support for an anti-Eucharistic ideology, since we're talking right now about a Eucharistic Congress going on in the church. Whatever you may think of the Eucharistic Congress, I've seen comments in my video section asking me why I'm not just 100% on board with what they're doing, and others who are very skeptical of the whole thing. And I've gotten reports from people who say the pilgrimages are great, but the actual rest of it is kind of a hot mess. I've seen opinions across the board on this. But there is a Congress going on right now, and its entire purpose is to reestablish among the faithful belief in the real presence. And this organization has a history of actually working against the authentic teaching of the faith about the Eucharist, helping in their own way to undermine the faith of countless American Catholics. And so, when this bishop promotes this, guess what happens? He promotes error. And he promotes the undermining of the belief in the real presence. He's actually working against the Eucharistic Congress going on nationally right now. And so we go to another article from the Lepanto Institute for this, with this headline. AUSCP president presents condemned teaching about the Eucharist. Now, the organization hosted a Eucharistic revival in the recent past of what they called a Eucharistic revival, hosted by a priest named Father James Batchick, who publicly rejects the church's teaching on the Eucharist. In fact, he tells you that we're not required to believe in transubstantiation, that theologians don't believe it's a binding teaching. That's news to everybody who actually knows the Catholic faith. See, according to the Lepanto Institute reporting on this, he holds the heresy of transsignification, which is a heretical idea of the Modernists proposed during the wild years and up to Vatican II to get the teaching on the Eucharist more amenable to Protestants. It was such a bad idea that Pope Paul VI formally condemned the idea. He didn't invoke papal infallibility when doing it, unfortunately. This would have been a great time for him to do so, but papal infallibility wasn't exactly in during the Vatican II years. But the main cheerleader was a character called Edward Skillabex, as just one example. But here's what Lepanto had to say about the priest's errors, which he espoused in a public talk that you can view on YouTube if you want to. Here's what Lepanto Institute's reporting says. Quote, the talk consists of Father Batchick answering a number of fictional questions concerning Mass and the Eucharist. The first question from a character named Abraham sets the overall tone of the presentation. Abraham is a traditionalist who doesn't like music or the sign of peace. Father Batchick emphasizes that liturgy is a communal activity and a common meal. Later, around the 20-minute mark, Father Batchick explains that some tell him Mass is a sacrifice, to which he responded, quote, it doesn't turn me on. Okay. He goes on to state that the Mass is a ritual gift exchange rather than a sacrifice. Other highlights include his discussion at 1 hour and 1 minute calling Archbishop Cordileone a culture warrior for his response to Lady Moloch, while then going on to praise Cardinal McElroy's approach on making the Eucharist, quote, common ground. However, the most alarming aspect of the talk is where Father Batchick swerves into downplaying or downright denying transubstantiation. Beginning around the 13-minute mark into the talk, Father Batchick presents the story of a woman named Sarah who is challenged by her Presbyterian husband concerning her belief in transubstantiation. Father Batchick first downplays transubstantiation by claiming that Catholics aren't, quote, tied to that as a teaching. Father Batchick then tells Sarah that she can explain Christ's presence in the Eucharist to her husband as transsignification by saying, quote, the priest says, Trent said that transubstantiation was a, quote, suitable way of describing the Eucharist. Most theologians don't think we're tied to that. The Vatican did repeat it in the 1950s, But I think most theologians would say we're not tied to that. So you can tell your husband, okay, you don't like it. I don't have to hold it as a Catholic. Here's another. Try this. How about thinking what happens in the Eucharist as transubstantiation? So that bread and wine, because the Eucharistic prayer is no longer merely bread and wine. They don't just throw it away when the Mass is over. It took on through the Mass a new significance. So you can tell your husband, no, I don't hold transubstantiation, I hold transsignification. When I go to communion, that's Jesus for me. That's him nourishing me. That's him strengthening me. That's helping me get through my day, tough day, and the dog-eat-dog world that I live in. Transsignification. Try that on your husband, see how it works. Back to Lepanto. The problem here is that Father Batchik is instructing his audience to hold a condemned view of Jesus' presence in the Eucharist. Pope Paul VI, in his encyclical Mysterium Fidei, expressly condemned the concept of transsignification as a, quote, false and disturbing opinion. Quoting Pope Paul VI, "For we can see that some of those who are dealing with this most holy mystery in speech and writing are disseminating opinions on the dogma of transubstantiation that are disturbing the minds of the faithful and causing them no small measure of confusion about matters of faith, just as if it were all right for someone to take doctrine that has already been defined by the Church and consign it to oblivion, or else interpret it in such a way as to weaken the genuine meaning of the words of the recognized force of the concepts involved." To give an example of what we're talking about, to concentrate on the notion of sacramental signs as if the symbolism, which no one will deny is certainly present in the most blessed Eucharist, fully expressed and exhausted the manner of Christ's presence in the sacrament, or to discuss the mystery of transubstantiation without mentioning what the Council of Trent had to say about the marvelous conversion of the whole substance of the bread into the body and the whole substance of the wine into the blood of Christ, as if they involved nothing more than transsignification or transfinalization, as they call it. Or finally to propose and act upon the opinion that Christ our Lord is no longer present in the consecrated hosts that remain after the celebration of the sacrifice of the Mass has been completed. Everyone can see that the spread of these and similar opinions does great harm to belief and devotion to the Eucharist. End quote. So why are the bishops, or at least some of them, encouraging their priests to go and listen to an organization and attend an organization that has done great harm to belief in the real presence of the Eucharist? Why? Why, when they have had a history of hosting condemned public figures who actually hold to errors that were formally condemned by the Church in the living memory of these bishops? Why do they do that? Is it because they don't actually care about the real presence of the Eucharist? Is it because that they don't actually care about what the Church teaches? I'm curious what you have to say about this. I'll have links to all this in my show notes at returntotradition.org, including a link to the video of the priest saying this stuff if you would like to see it for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. You can listen to him tell you why it is that you should not believe what the Church believes and that he apparently knows better. Let me know what you think of this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.